there's a huge uncertainty when you're waiting on a transport from a jail back home, or back to the place that has the warrant on you. And then on top of that, nobody can tell you anything, like when. So this was forcing me to strengthen my faith, and that I could see that I'm getting what I want when I need it. So I ran back into Allison in the day room, and she was carrying a book that she wanted to share with me, and it was Ram Dass, called Be Here Now. She said, take the book, and she said, and feel the energy, and then ask for answers. So I took the book in my hand. I actually have a copy of that book now. And I had heard several of Ram Dass's quotes before, but I didn't really know his story. But just suddenly I had this connection with him just by holding this book. The pages were brown paper, and then there was like black psychedelic drawings and messages on the inside of the pages. So my first message was, you just love until you and the beloved become one. Thank you, I said. I walked over to the stairs that go up to the second tier, and at those stairs, on the other side of the railing, was this big window so you could see outside at the walkway. And I saw this huge furry caterpillar. And I just thought about how that caterpillar, I had no idea that it was going through a beautiful transformation. And so I took that as a metaphor from God that, I knew that all my time in solitude was spiritually awakening me. And with more work and light, that I would be able to shine again and heal those that were in my path. So once I returned back to my cot and laid down, I sent some light and love around my family and let it surround them. And I started to forgive the anger that had been caused by my response of fear. My grandmother knew I loved her. We were really close when I was growing up, and she took care of me when I was sick, and then I would take care of her when she was sick, and I would have done anything for her. Even in my 40s, my grandparents still called me their little girl. So I was in between these walls, and I was missing them so much. I traced my finger on the pattern of the cinder blocks to help me go into a meditative state. It was as close as I was going to get to a Zen garden. So I was almost 40, and I was living in this old trailer next to my grandparents' property. And one night I was sleeping really hard, and then I jumped up in my sleep, and I saw on my phone that my grandmother was calling, and I said, hello. And I was just trying to wake up enough to answer the phone, and she said, Britt, help me, I'm dying. And I jumped in my car, and I called for an ambulance to get straight to her. And of course I beat them to their house. And when I walked up and went inside the house, she was gray in color, and she was sitting on the edge of the sofa with a washcloth against her face. And my granddad was sitting in his recliner with this worried look on his face. She said, she said, Britt, I don't know, I think it was something that I ate last night. And my granddad said, yeah, she's been vomiting all night. EMS showed up, and I knew the crew. I used to work with them. And we got her on the stretcher and out the door, and I told Granddad that I would go over to the hospital and I would take care of things and let him know what was going on. So when we got her on the ambulance, we started checking her vitals and putting her on the heart monitor, and I was able to stay in the back with her and the paramedic because I knew him. And once we got inside the ER, they were running tests, and within an hour they came back saying that she was septic and that she had a bad infection, and if we'd have waited any longer she would have died. So after they got her to a room and we were waiting on a admitting nurse to show up and evaluate her, she had gone through the whole night and the morning without her regular meds, and she was beginning to be agitated and restless because she was on daily sedatives and antidepressants, and the nurse had gotten short-tempered, not knowing how to handle it. And the nurse left to go get some orders for her meds, and I climbed in the bed with my grandmom, and I just started using my hand to release healing energy into her. And within minutes, she was relaxed and sleepy. The nurse come back in the room, and she said, "What happened?" And I said, "It's just a form of prayer." And I was using my energy work to help calm her anxieties and assist the healing in her infection. I spent that whole week in the hospital with her, making sure she had everything that she needed until she made a full recovery. And my granddad, he would come and he would sit and visit with us during the day for a little bit, and then he would go home. And then I hear day room is it's over. It's time to get back to your cubbies. And I was starting to get emails from my sister and a couple of my friends, and when the lights were out, the deputy would bring these emails that were printed on this yellow paper and then lay them on our wall. And one was like, "Hey Britt, I'm thinking of you and sending you good thoughts." And she said, "I wish you were here. I could really use your help and let you cheer me on, and I need some Reiki treatments, and I've hoped that you've been able to share your gift of healing with some of your new colleagues." She said, "Keep your chin up." And then receiving these emails from people on the outside mattered so much to me because it was a way for me to receive affection while feeling so isolated. Then I picked up another one. It was from my sister, and it said, "Hey Britt," she said, "I'm so happy." She said, "I just talked to you and you made me laugh so hard." She said, "I've not laughed in days." And she said, "Me, you, and Jay always knew how to make each other feel better." And she said, "I'm so sorry. You had to make me feel better, and you're the one in jail." But she said, "Thank you so much. You make a difference in everyone around you. And it's such a blessing. You're an angel. We love you and we miss you like crazy. Love your sister." And Susan had been so supportive the whole time I was locked up. I mean, she answered all my calls, and she did anything she could to find out what was the next thing for me and what was going to happen next. On Saturday, we were offered a church service outside the dorm, and I wanted to go because I knew that the pastor would possibly give me some kind of message from God, and it would give me hope. And the pastor did say, we don't just say we love you, we show it in our actions. And I thought about how I showed love and how other people were showing me love. And then I thought about my shaman back in Arizona, and she told me that everything is in perfect timing. And that meant I would be picked up from Las Colinas at the perfect time. And then that took me back to another message from that jail chaplain where she said, God may be delaying your trip home in order to protect you from something. And this is where I could connect to all that I was focusing on with the when that was causing a lot of anxiety, and then just realize it would be in perfect timing. So I was able to change my thoughts back over to nature and water and wildlife and sunshine and all the things that nurtured my spirit. I raised up from my cot to see what the other women around me were doing, and everyone was down and quiet. So I put my sweatshirt over my ears, and I just pretended to be held and hugged by the people that love me. And then I fell asleep. And then breakfast. Do not come down here in your gown. Uh, Change into your clothes before you come down and get food to take back to your cubby. And this is what this deputy yelled. This was my second week in jail, and this was the first time anyone had ever enforced the rule of not being able to come down to get your breakfast in your gown. And I was just getting so tired of the inconsistency in there. I walked down, I got my cardboard box of food. It was egg scrambled with hot peppers, an orange, a carton of milk, and a box of cornflakes. I guess I was going to starve waiting on lunch. So I was like, hey, listen, does anybody around me want my eggs? And then one of the women whispered, I'll take them. And then I walked toward her cubby, I handed her my eggs, and then I was able to hand my milk to the other girl next to me. And I went back to sleep while I was daydreaming about making my next phone calls to Dad and Susan and my other friends. And so it was Sunday, and I heard one of the women mention something else about another church service. So day room was open, and you had to go over and you had to sign this sheet to get on a list to go to church. They only allowed so many people out of that dorm to go to church. So I walked down and I signed my name on the line, and it was first come, first serve. And it was the same thing with getting an hour outside, if they would allow that. Like, you put your name on the list every so often, and they would let you go outside for an hour, which I had been out twice in those 2 weeks. I stood by the window and I waited on her permission to start walking through the church. And then it was, okay, ladies, start walking. Don't get out of line. And I started walking in line behind the other inmates. We got to the building where we had been told that we could go in and sit and listen to a woman preach. And she said, I spent a lot of time in this jail, ladies. She said, I was hooked on drugs and I continued getting charges. She said, the last time I was booked in this place, she said, I laid on the floor and I cried out to God that if he would just give me another chance, that I would do whatever he wanted me to do to serve him. And I just remember sitting in my seat going, gosh, that's exactly what I've been doing in here. God, if you'll just get me out of this, I'll do whatever I can to serve you and be a light for the people that come in my path. So everyone was really quiet, and they listened to her testimony. And we had our Bibles open to a psalm. And she continued to tell us, she said, I got out of here. She said, I got my record expunged. She said, I went to school. She said, I got my degree in social work. And she said, now I help women with a record full of felonies get their records expunged and start a new life. She said, I had an abusive husband. And she said, and I would just read the Psalms. And she said, I'd plead for God to take care and give him the revenge for everything that he had done to me. And she said he had his truck stolen twice. He lost his apartment. He got arrested. And I was just listening to that. And I was like, God's going to take care of this ex-girlfriend that's caused this. And I just had to believe that. I had to believe that God would seek justice for me. And then I started feeling my face get just really, really hot. And the Spirit kept telling me to share my testimony with the women sitting there. And so I raised my trembling hand, not knowing if I should speak or not. She said, yes, go ahead. She said, say whatever you need to. And I said, okay. I said, I'm Brittany. And I said, most of you in here call me Georgia, or you know me by Georgia. And I said, I was arrested at the border over 2 weeks ago and ended up here with a lost spirit. I said, the chaplain gave me a Bible and prayed for me. And I said, I have been in here reading the Jesus stories. And I was told that I would get out in just a couple of days. I said, and now look, I have no idea when I'm going to be picked up. I said, the delay in my transport back home has been the time I've needed for my heart to be transformed by the Spirit of Christ. And I could see some of the women around me crying. I mean, hell, I was choking back on my own tears. And this lady was like, okay, thank you for sharing. The deputy walks in right when we're having this intimate, vulnerable moment and yells, okay, ladies, that's it. That's enough. Let's go. I mean, we didn't even get to finish our fucking church service. So I stood up and some of the women were approaching me saying, Georgia, thanks for saying those things. You know, you're going to get out of here soon. And then it was get your hands up against the wall, stand there while we pat you down before leaving and going outside. So they literally watched us go in, sit down. There were glass windows. You couldn't leave. And then we had to be patted down before walking back out of this church service. I knew when I got out of there that all this journaling that I was doing and writing on this San Diego sheriff's stationery would turn into a book. And that I would be able to be a voice for the injustice within this prison system. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. The book's written, and I'm just going through it. We headed back to the dorms with some hope in our hearts, and it was still early in the day, and I was still feeling very vulnerable. And there was some time left in the day room that afternoon when we got there. And I wanted to call somebody. I wanted them to play that Ocean song for me over the phone. I knew at the time that listening to that song on the beach, 2 days before I got arrested, was that what had opened my heart for me to cry out to God to help me. And, I just laid there and I kept hearing the Spirit say, if one sheep is lost, you go get that one sheep. And I was like, okay, well, is Spirit asking me to read these Gospels to the women in there? And there was this vision of me taking my Bible to the day room area and saying, hey, I thought about saying a prayer and us reading these Gospels for whoever wants to sit and read them. And then I'd kind of argue with God and be like, God, these women aren't interested in prayer or the Bible. This is a waste of time. The only thing they care about is watching TV, making phone calls, using food for a spread, and playing cards. And then again, if one sheep is lost, you go get that sheep. I just kept hearing it repeatedly. All right, I was screaming within. So I took my Bible and I did just what I saw in the vision. Elizabeth followed me over to the table by the window and she said, Georgia, what are we doing? And I said, well, we're going to start reading the book of John, and this will teach you about who the real Jesus is. She said, Georgia, I don't know. She said, I can't read that well. I said, it's okay. I said, when you come across a word that you can't pronounce, I'll help you. I said a small prayer for us, and then I opened my Bible to the book of John and slid it right in between us. And she began to read the first chapter. When she got to a word, I helped her sound that out. And I could see some hope in her facial expressions. I returned back over to the phone calls, and I was just full of excitement. And I couldn't wait to tell my friend, you won't believe what happened. I shared the church scene and how the Spirit had used me, and then how I was reading the Bible to the women in there. I mean, I was just so excited to finally get some revelation of, what was possible with being inside there and being arrested. And so one of the things she said was, well, it looks like our paths are going in different ways and you're changing in there, so I don't know if this is going to work. And I just I hurt for her soul, but I knew that I was not going to let one more person pull me away from Jesus and that Spirit that I had walked away from. And, I kept thinking about going on another pilgrimage. And anyway, so Elizabeth was one of my neighbors, and we were able to whisper to each other. And once we returned to the cubby, I could not believe one woman showed up to learn about Jesus' stories. And I had heard spirit. Even though I doubted it at first and I argued, I did what I had heard. And then I looked over at Linton and, just checking and see if she had decided to wake up. And she raised up and poured some of her red Kool-Aid mix in a plastic cup. And you could order your own cup through commissary. And so she took the cup and the mix, and she went into the restroom and added water, and then she came back and she started staring at it with that little black comb. I said, Linton, you're going to get in the habit of doing this in here, and when you get back to your life with your friends, I said, they're going to be cracking up when you're sitting at the table and you pull out a comb and start steering your drink at the table. And she just busted out laughing. I just wanted to keep the jokes going because I knew it helped other people in there.